Part 2. She married the dying Duke and inherited everything. But what happened later left everyone speechless. Before we begin this beautiful continuation, tell me in the comments, were you waiting for this sequel? If you haven't watched Part 1, the link is in the description. But trust me, what happens in this story will leave you speechless. Subscribe if you love romantic stories like this. Now let's fall into this tale together. 8 months had passed since Edmund Ashworth, Duke of Ashworth, closed his eyes for the last time. 8 months since Rosalind had become a widow at 21. 8 months since Alexander had inherited a title he'd always known would be his, but had never truly wanted to claim. Spring had returned to Ashworth Manor. The gardens Vivienne had planted decades ago were coming back to life. Daffodils pushing through soil still cold from winter. Cherry trees beginning to bud. The roses, always the roses, showing the first hints of green on bare branches. But inside the manor, winter lingered, not in temperature. The fireplaces were well tended, the rooms warm. But in the careful distance, Rosalind and Alexander maintained. In the words they didn't say, in the way they orbited each other like planets, gravitationally bound but never touching, the manor had become a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance. Rosalind took breakfast at 7, Alexander at 8. She worked in the smaller study, the one Edmund had given her. He worked in the ducal office. They met for estate business 3 times a week, always formal, always proper, always with Mrs. Pemberton or Whitmore present, though neither had requested chaperones. They were co-administrators, partners in managing 5,000 acres and the lives of 300 tenants. Nothing more, nothing more. The lie was wearing thin. It was a Thursday morning in late March when everything began to unravel. Rosalind was in her study, reviewing the account books from the southern farms. Numbers had always calmed her, clean, orderly, making sense in ways human emotions never did. The Davies family wanted to expand their dairy operation. The Thompsons needed new equipment for the vineyards. The Marshalls were 3 months behind on rent, but their youngest had been sick, and Rosalind had already decided to forgive the debt. Edmund would have approved. She was making notes in the margins when she heard it, not the usual 3 firm knocks that signaled Alexander. Shouting, male voices, angry, coming from the entrance hall. Rosalind stood quickly, the account book falling closed. She moved to the door, opened it carefully. The entrance hall, that vast space of black and white marble where she'd first walked as a bride 8 months ago, was filled with men, 4 of them, dressed in expensive clothes that somehow looked cheap. Loud voices echoing off the high ceiling, and at the center, face red with exertion and rage, Cornelius Blackwood. He'd aged badly in 8 months. His face was puffier, broken veins visible even from a distance. His expensive coat strained across a belly that spoke of too much wine and too little restraint. But his eyes, those were the same. Cold, calculating, greedy. "Where is she?" he bellowed, voice carrying through the manor like a crack of thunder. "Where is the little fortune hunter?" Mrs. Pemberton stood between Cornelius and the stairs, face pale, but voice steady. "Mr. Blackwood, I must insist you leave immediately. You were not invited and you are not welcome in this house." "Not welcome? Not welcome?" Cornelius laughed. Harsh, ugly sound. "This is my family's house. My blood built these walls, and some jumped-up gutter snipe from Manchester thinks she can keep me out." Rosalind felt ice flood her veins. She should retreat, call for Alexander, let him handle this. But 8 months of managing estates, making decisions, holding her own against stubborn tenants and skeptical solicitors, had changed something in her. She wasn't the terrified girl who'd been sold by her father anymore. She was the Duchess of Ashworth. Rosalind stepped into the hallway, head high, back straight, every inch the aristocrat Mrs. Pemberton had trained her to be. "I am here, Mr. Blackwood." Every head turned. Cornelius's eyes found her. Something ugly crossed his face, triumph mixed with contempt. "There she is," he said, voice dripping false politeness. "The grieving widow. Tell me, Your Grace." The title was a mockery in his mouth. "How are you enjoying my cousin's fortune?" "I am managing it responsibly," Rosalind said, voice calm though her heart hammered, as the late Duke intended. "Now I must ask you to leave. This is private property and you are trespassing." "Trespassing?" Cornelius walked toward her, boots loud on marble. "Interesting word. Let's talk about trespassing, shall we? Let's talk about a 20-year-old girl who trespassed into a dying man's bed and walked away with £400,000. That is enough. We've been through this before." Alexander's voice cut through the hall like a blade. He stood at the top of the stairs, Rosalind hadn't heard him approach, still in riding clothes, clearly just returned from inspecting the northern properties. Tall, commanding, every inch the Duke his uncle had been, but his eyes were cold, dangerous. "Alexander!" Cornelius's tone shifted, became almost friendly. "Good. You should hear this too. In fact, you should be thanking me. I'm about to save you from a very expensive mistake." I said that is enough. Alexander descended the stairs slowly, deliberately, each step measured. "You will apologize to the Duchess and leave. Now." "Apologize?" Cornelius laughed again. "For what?" "Speaking the truth. Everyone in London knows it, Alexander. Everyone whispers it at every dinner party, every ball. The old Duke's child bride, married for months." He held up fingers, counting mockingly, "and then conveniently widowed. Wealthy, independent, free." He turned back to Rosalind, eyes gleaming. "Tell me, Your Grace, how exactly did you convince a 75-year-old man to marry you? What exactly did you offer him?" The slap came so fast Cornelius had no time to prepare. Alexander's hand connected with his face with a crack that echoed through the hall. Cornelius staggered back, hand flying to his reddening cheek, eyes wide with shock. "You will not speak to her that way," Alexander said, voice low but shaking with barely controlled rage. "Not in this house, not anywhere. Apologize, now. You hit me, and I'll do it again if you don't leave. Immediately." For a moment, genuine fear crossed Cornelius's face. Alexander was younger, stronger, and clearly willing to use violence if necessary. But then Cornelius smiled, slow, ugly. "This is perfect," he said softly. "Absolutely perfect. The Duke defending his uncle's widow with violence. How very protective. Tell me, Alexander, when did you start sharing her bed? Before Edmund died? Or did you have the decency to wait until after the funeral?" The second slap never came. Alexander's hand stopped mid-air, trembling with the effort of control, because Cornelius's words had found their mark. "And that's what I thought." Cornelius straightened his coat, still smiling. "Don't worry, soon everyone will know the truth. I have evidence, witnesses, proof that this entire charade was a fraud from the beginning." He turned toward the door, his companions following, but at the threshold he stopped, looked back. "See you in court, Your Grace, both of you." And he left, the heavy oak doors slamming behind him with a finality that felt like a death knell. Silence fell over the entrance hall. Rosalind stood frozen, every muscle locked. Her face felt numb. Her hands shook. Court. Evidence. Fraud. The words circled in her mind like vultures. "Rosalind." Alexander's voice was gentle now, the rage gone, replaced by concern. "Are you all right?" She couldn't answer, couldn't move. "Rosalind, look at me." She turned slowly. Alexander stood close, too close, face filled with worry and something else. Something that had been growing between them for months, careful and secret and utterly forbidden. "He's lying," Alexander said firmly. "Whatever he claims to have, whatever evidence he thinks he's found, it's lies. Edmund's marriage was legitimate, legal, unquestionable." He said fraud. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. He said court. He can say whatever he wants. It doesn't make it true. "Alexander." She swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "What if he knows? About the marriage not being—" She couldn't finish. Couldn't say it aloud with Mrs. Pemberton and 2 footmen present. Understanding flickered in Alexander's eyes. "My study," he said quietly. "Now, Mrs. Pemberton, no interruptions." Alexander's study, the ducal study, with its dark paneling and portraits of stern ancestors, felt suffocating. Rosalind stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, staring out at gardens she couldn't really see. Behind her, she heard Alexander pour 2 glasses of brandy, heard his footsteps approaching. "Drink." She took the glass with shaking hands. The liquid burned going down but brought welcome warmth. "Talk to me," Alexander said softly. "What are you afraid he knows?" "Everything." The word broke on a sob she tried to suppress. "Alexander, if he knows the marriage wasn't, if he can prove Edmund and I never—" She couldn't say it. "Even now, even after 8 months, consummated," Alexander finished, voice carefully neutral. "Yes." Silence. Then, "How would he know that?" "I don't know. Servants, doctors, maybe Edmund told someone before he died." "Edmund would never." Alexander's voice was firm. "He protected you even in death. He wouldn't have told anyone something that could be used against you." "Then how?" Rosalind turned, looking at him desperately. How could Cornelius possibly know? Alexander set his glass down, ran a hand through his hair, gesture of frustration she'd come to recognize. He might be guessing, hoping to shake you into confession. Or, he paused, or he might have bribed someone, a maid who noticed you always slept in separate rooms, her doctor who examined Edmund and can testify he was physically capable. The implications made Rosalind feel sick. If it goes to court, she couldn't finish. If it goes to court, I'll testify, Alexander said firmly. I'll tell them exactly what Edmund told me, that he chose not to exercise conjugal rights out of decency and respect, that his decision doesn't invalidate the marriage. Will they believe you? I'm the Duke of Ashworth. My word carries weight. And I'm the common girl who married a dying man for money. Bitterness flooded her voice. Whose word carries more weight, do you think? Alexander crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. He took her shoulders, gentle but firm, forcing her to look at him. You are not a common girl. You are the Duchess of Ashworth. You earned that title through your intelligence, your compassion, your strength. Edmund saw it. I see it. And any court in England will see it if we present the truth properly. The truth? Rosalind felt tears threaten. The truth is, I married a 75-year-old man for money. The truth is, he died and left me wealthy. The truth is, his nephew and I have been living together for 8 months, working closely every day, and... She stopped, too close to the edge. And what? Alexander's voice was barely above a whisper. His hands were still on her shoulders. Warm, strong, impossible to ignore. Nothing. Rosalind. Nothing, Alexander. She pulled away, putting distance between them. Necessary distance. We've been working together, administering the estates, exactly as Edmund intended. That's all. Is it? The question hung in the air between them. Rosalind couldn't answer, because the truth, the real truth, was too dangerous to speak aloud. The truth was, she'd started falling in love with Alexander somewhere between the 3rd estate meeting and the 100th dinner. Started noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he listened when she spoke, really listened. Like her opinions mattered. The way he defended her against tenants who thought a woman couldn't possibly understand land management. The truth was, she dreamed about him, woke up aching, spent hours analyzing every word, every glance, searching for signs he felt the same impossible thing. The truth was, she was in love with her dead husband's nephew, and she could never, ever tell him. It's all it can be, she said finally, voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. Edmund saved me, Alexander, gave me everything. The least I can do is honor his memory by keeping things proper. Something flickered across Alexander's face. Pain, maybe, or resignation. Of course, he said quietly. Forgive me, I shouldn't have. Don't, she held up a hand. Please don't apologize. Just help me figure out what to do about Cornelius. Alexander nodded. Back to business, back to safety. I'll contact Whitmore. Have him review all the legal documents again, make sure everything is airtight. And if it's not, then we fight. His voice was steel. Whatever Cornelius throws at us, we fight. Together, together. The word shouldn't have made her heart leap, but it did. The rumors started the next day. Rosalind first heard them in the village. She'd gone to inspect the new school Edmund's money had built, one of her projects, giving poor children the education she'd never had. The headmistress, Mrs. Carroll, greeted her warmly as always, but there was something in her eyes, pity, maybe, or concern. Your Grace, she said carefully, I feel I should warn you. There's been talk. What kind of talk? Mrs. Carroll glanced around, making sure the children were out of earshot. Mr. Blackwood was in the village yesterday, at the Rose and Crown. He was, she paused, choosing words carefully. He was suggesting that your marriage to the late Duke was not entirely legitimate. Ice flooded Rosalind's veins. He said the Duke was coerced, manipulated by a young woman who, forgive me, Your Grace, I'm only repeating what he said, who used her feminine wiles to trick a sick old man. That's a lie. I know it is. Mrs. Carroll's voice was firm. Anyone who knew the Duke knows he was sharp as a tack until the very end, but Mr. Blackwood was very convincing. He had papers, documents. He said he's filing a legal challenge to the will. Rosalind forced herself to breathe, to think. What else did he say? Mrs. Carroll hesitated. Then, he suggested that you and the new Duke have been inappropriately close, that perhaps the affection between you began before the old Duke's death. There it was. The accusation, out in the open. Thank you for telling me, Rosalind managed to say. I appreciate your honesty. She left quickly, before the headmistress could see her hands shaking. By the time she returned to the manor, the damage was done. 3 dinner invitations had been withdrawn. 2 letters had arrived from London acquaintances, carefully worded, but the message was clear. Society was turning against her. And worst of all, a formal legal notice from Cornelius Blackwood's solicitor, notice of challenge to the will and testament of Edmund Laurent Ashworth, Duke of Ashworth, grounds, mental incapacity of the testator at time of marriage, undue influence by Mrs. Rosalind Ashworth, fraud in the procurement of marriage, non-consummation rendering marriage voidable, improper relationship between widow and heir. The hearing was set for 6 weeks from now. Rosalind sat in her study, the notice trembling in her hands, and finally let herself cry. Not quiet tears, not dignified grief, sobs that shook her entire body, terror and rage and helplessness all mixed together. She'd thought she was safe, thought Edmund had protected her, thought the worst was behind her. She'd been wrong. She didn't hear Alexander enter, didn't know he was there until she felt his hand on her shoulder. Rosalind, she looked up, face wet, eyes swollen, all pretense of dignity abandoned. He's going to win, she whispered. Alexander, he's going to take everything. Not just the money, I don't care about the money, but Edmund's trust, his faith in me, everything he believed I could be. Cornelius is going to prove I was never worthy of any of it, that Edmund was wrong about me. No. Alexander knelt beside her chair. No, he's not. I won't let him. How can you stop him? He's right, Alexander. About all of it. Edmund was old and sick. I did marry him for money, at least at first. The marriage wasn't consummated. And we... She couldn't finish. And we what? Alexander's voice was gentle but insistent. What about us, Rosalind? There is no us, she said desperately. There can't be. Don't you see? If there's even a hint that we have feelings for each other, it proves everything Cornelius is saying. It makes me the scheming seductress who married a dying man to get close to his nephew. Is that what you think you are? It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what they'll think, what a court will think. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if I don't care? Rosalind's breath caught on what? What if I don't care what they think? He took her hands, both of them, holding them firmly. What if I stand up in that courtroom and tell the truth, that yes, I've fallen in love with you, that yes, it happened after Edmund died, that it's real and honest and has nothing to do with money or manipulation or fraud. Alexander, you can't. Why not? His grey-blue eyes, Edmund's eyes, bored into hers. Shues, why can't I tell the truth? Because it will ruin you. The scandal alone would destroy your reputation. You'd lose respect, lose political connections, lose everything Edmund built for you. I don't care. You should care. I don't. He squeezed her hands. Rosalind, listen to me. I have spent 8 months trying to do the right thing, trying to honor my uncle's memory by keeping my distance from you, trying to be proper and appropriate and respectful. He laughed, bitter sound. And it's been hell, absolute hell, because every day I see you making brilliant decisions about the estates. Every day I watch you care for tenants with the same compassion Edmund had. Every day I fall more in love with you and have to pretend I don't. Tears streamed down Rosalind's face. We can't, she whispered. Edmund saved me, trusted me. How can I betray that by what? By living? Alexander's voice was fierce now. By allowing yourself to be happy. Rosalind, Edmund wanted this. He told me, in those last days, he said if we found each other, if love grew between us, we should take it, not waste it. He said that. Yes. Alexander's thumbs brushed across her knuckles. He said he and Vivian had 40 years, and it still wasn't enough. He said if we had a chance at even a fraction of that, we'd be fools not to take it. But the scandal, damn the scandal. The curse shocked her. Alexander never swore. Rosalind, I will stand in that court and tell them the truth, all of it, that Edmund's marriage was legitimate, that you cared for him with genuine affection, that nothing inappropriate happened while he lived, and that after, two people who were grieving found comfort in each other and it grew into something real. They won't believe you. Then I'll make them believe. He lifted one of her hands to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. I will fight for you, Rosalind, for us. I will stand against Cornelius, against society, against anyone who tries to take you down. Why? The word came out broken. Tell us, why would you risk everything for me? Alexander smiled, sad but genuine. Because Edmund was right. You're extraordinary. And I'm tired, so damn tired, of pretending I don't see it. Of acting like working beside you every day doesn't matter, like I don't notice every decision you make, every kindness you show. Edmund saw something in you worth saving, and He stopped, voice breaking slightly. I see it too, and I can't keep pretending I don't. Rosalind closed her eyes, tears still falling. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was wrong, dangerous, would make everything worse. But her heart, her stupid, stubborn heart, was screaming something else entirely. I can't, she whispered. Alexander, I can't let myself. Edmund trusted me, believed in me. How can I betray that by... She couldn't finish, couldn't name the feeling that had been growing for months. Terrifying and wonderful and absolutely impossible. By what? Alexander's voice was gentle. By living, by letting yourself feel something real. By proving everyone right, she said brokenly, that I was always just what they say I am. A fortune hunter who wanted what? Me. He said it without ego, just honest question. Rosalind, if that were true, you'd have pursued me months ago. You've done the opposite. You've kept every possible distance. Stayed proper, professional. So proper it hurts. But we can't. Rosalind pulled her hands away, standing quickly. Not now. Not with the hearing coming. Alexander, if we're together, it proves everything Cornelius is saying. We'll fight it. How? By admitting we're in love. By confirming everyone's worst suspicions. She paced, hands pressed to her temples. No, we have to stay apart. Until after the hearing. Until this is settled. Rosalind, please. She looked at him desperately. Please, Alexander. If you love me, help me win this first. Help me keep what Edmund gave me. And after, if we win, then maybe we can... She couldn't finish. Couldn't promise something she wasn't sure she could deliver. Alexander stood slowly, every line of his body tense with frustration and longing. All right, he said quietly. We do this your way. We stay apart. We're professional, co-administrators, and nothing more. Thank you. But Rosalind, he paused at the door. When this is over, when we've beaten Cornelius and proven Edmund's will was legitimate, I'm not waiting anymore. I'm going to court you properly, publicly. And I'm going to marry you, scandal be damned. He left before she could respond. Rosalind sank back into her chair, heart racing, mind spinning. 6 weeks. 6 weeks to save everything Edmund had given her. 6 weeks to prove she wasn't a fraud, wasn't a gold digger, wasn't a scheming seductress. 6 weeks before she could even think about a future with Alexander, if she survived that long. The next 4 weeks were a special kind of hell. Cornelius wasn't just attacking Rosalind legally, he was destroying her socially, and with far more ferocity than he had in the previous 8 months. Before, the whispers had been contained, quiet speculation at dinner parties, raised eyebrows when her name was mentioned, questions about the age difference, the speed of the marriage, the convenient inheritance. Rosalind had endured it, held her head high, let her work speak for itself. But now Cornelius had given society something new to savage her with, the non-consummation. Every dinner party in London exploded with the revelation. It wasn't just the usual gossip about the young widow and her suspiciously attentive co-administrator anymore. Now they had concrete scandal to dissect, a marriage that was never a marriage, a duke too old or too manipulated to exercise his conjugal rights. A calculating girl who'd married for money without even having to perform wifely duties, shameless creature, gold-digging whore. You dishonor a great man's memory. The cruelty was breathtaking, and it spread like wildfire. Rosalind heard each accusation, let the poison sink in, used it to fuel her determination. She would not break, she would not run, she would fight. Alexander had hired 3 different solicitors to prepare their defense. Whitmore led the team, but he'd brought in specialists, one in estate law, one in marriage law, one who'd handled aristocratic scandals before. They met daily in the library, poring over documents, building arguments, anticipating every angle Cornelius might attack from. The consummation issue is the weakest point, said Mr. Hartley, the marriage law specialist. He was a thin man with wire spectacles and a perpetually worried expression. English law is murky on the subject. Technically, non-consummation can be grounds for annulment, but only if one party requests it during the marriage. Since the Duke is deceased, he can't exactly request an annulment now, Alexander finished dryly. Precisely. However, Cornelius will argue that the marriage was never valid to begin with, that it was a legal fiction created to facilitate inheritance fraud. Can he prove that? Rosalind asked. She sat at Edmund's old desk, surrounded by ledgers and papers, looking every inch the competent administrator she'd become. Not easily, but he doesn't need absolute proof. He just needs to create enough doubt that the court questions the legitimacy. What about Edmund's mental capacity? Alexander leaned forward. We have letters he wrote, business decisions he made, all demonstrating clear thinking right up until his stroke, which helps considerably. Whitmore interjected. I've also secured testimony from Dr. Harrison, who examined His Grace regularly. He's prepared to testify under oath that the Duke was completely mentally competent. And the marriage itself? Rosalind's voice was steady, though her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The ceremony was legitimate, yes, completely, Whitmore confirmed. Performed by an archbishop, witnessed by respected members of society, properly registered. There's no legal ambiguity there. Then what's our vulnerability? Alexander's eyes were sharp. What's the real danger? The three solicitors exchanged glances. Finally, Hartley spoke. The appearance of impropriety. Your Grace, forgive my directness, but you and the Duchess have been living under the same roof for 8 months, working closely together. If Cornelius can prove, or even suggest, that your relationship is more than professional, it isn't, Alexander said flatly. With respect, Your Grace, it doesn't matter what the truth is. It matters what can be proven or suggested, and Cornelius has apparently found witnesses willing to testify that they've observed inappropriate familiarity between you. Ice flooded Rosalind's veins. What witnesses? Former servants, mostly. A maid who claims she saw you and His Grace in private conversation with the door closed. A footman who swears you rode out alone together multiple times. Nothing concrete, but enough to paint a picture. Rosalind finished bitterly. I'm afraid so. Silence fell over the library. Outside, rain had started, steady, cold, matching the mood perfectly. So what do we do? Alexander asked finally. Whitmore cleared his throat. We need to demonstrate beyond doubt that your relationship is purely professional. That means, unfortunately, even more distance than you've already maintained. Separate residences would be ideal, but no. Alexander's voice was firm. This is Rosalind's home. Edmund gave it to her. I'm not forcing her out because of gossip and lies. Then perhaps Your Grace could... I'm not leaving either. This is the ducal seat. I have responsibilities here. Then we work with what we have, Whitmore said pragmatically. We schedule all meetings to have witnesses present. We ensure Her Grace is never without a chaperone when Your Grace is nearby. We create an unimpeachable appearance of propriety. Rosalind felt something inside her curl up and die. More distance, more walls, more pretending Alexander was just a business partner and nothing more. 8 more weeks of it, at minimum. She wasn't sure she could survive. That night, Rosalind couldn't sleep. She'd tried, lay in the enormous bed that had once felt like luxury and now felt like a prison, counted sheep, recited poetry, reviewed estate numbers in her head. Nothing worked. Finally, at 2 in the morning, she gave up, wrapped herself in a heavy robe and went downstairs to the library. Reading sometimes helped when sleep wouldn't come. The manor was silent at this hour, only the ticking of the grandfather clock in the entrance hall, the occasional creak of old wood settling. Rosalind lit a single candle and began browsing the shelves. Maybe something dry and academic. Estate law, perhaps. Or, can't sleep either. She spun around, heart leaping. Alexander stood in the doorway, also in a robe, hair disheveled, eyes tired. He looked as exhausted as she felt. I was just looking for a book. At 2 in the morning? Sleep is difficult lately. Tell me about it. Alexander entered the library, closing the door behind him. Then he stopped, looked at the closed door. I should leave that open. Witnesses. Propriety. There's no one awake to witness anything, Rosalind said softly. Which is exactly why I should leave it open. But he didn't move to open it. They stood there in the candlelight, the library feeling suddenly very small despite its vast size. This is impossible, Alexander said finally. Absolutely impossible. What is? This, us, pretending we're nothing to each other when we're... He stopped, ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. When we're not nothing, Alexander, I know we agreed. Stay apart. Be professional, win the case first. He laughed, bitter sound. But it's killing me, Rosalind, watching you from across the room, having to keep Mrs. Pemberton present for every conversation, not being able to just talk to you. Really talk? Rosalind's throat tightened. I know, she whispered. I know. Do you? He took a step closer. Do you know that I think about you every waking moment? That I see you making brilliant decisions about the estates and I'm proud. So damn proud, but I can't tell you. That I watch you being kind to tenants, and I want to kiss you right there in front of everyone, and I can't. Stop. Her voice broke. Please stop. Why? Because it's true, because you feel it too. Because it doesn't matter what I feel. The words burst out of her. Alexander, in 4 weeks I have to stand in a courtroom and prove I'm not a scheming gold digger. If we're together, if there's even a hint that we care about each other, I lose everything. Not just the money. Edmund's legacy, his trust, his belief that I was worth saving. You were worth saving. Was I? Tears spilled down her cheeks. Sometimes I'm not sure anymore. Sometimes I think Cornelius is right. That I manipulated a dying man, took his money, and now I'm trying to seduce his nephew too. That's not true, isn't it? Look at us right now, Alexander. 2 in the morning. Alone. Door closed. If anyone saw us, I don't care if anyone sees us. Well, I do. She was crying openly now. I care because Edmund cared. He gave me everything. Education, position, independence, a chance to be something more than my father's property. And I won't dishonor that by being exactly what everyone says I am. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if Edmund wanted this? Wanted what? Us. Alexander's voice was soft. Rosalind, in those last days, he kept pushing us together. The co-administration wasn't just about protecting you. It was about forcing us to know each other, to work together, to what? Fall in love. The words were out before she could stop them. Silence. The word hung between them like a confession. Yes, Alexander said finally. I think that's exactly what he wanted. I think he saw something we couldn't see yet, and I think he'd be happy, not angry, happy, if we, what? Declared ourselves, got married, gave Cornelius exactly the ammunition he needs to destroy everything Edmund built. After the trial, what if we lose the trial, Alexander? What if Cornelius wins and takes everything, and we're left with nothing but scandal? Then we'd have each other. That's not enough. Why not? He closed the distance between them completely. Rosalind, I don't care about the money. I don't care about the estates. If we lost it all tomorrow, I'd still have the dukedom and enough to live comfortably. We could, but I'd care. She looked up at him desperately. Don't you understand? It's not about the money for me either. It's about proving Edmund was right, that I was worth his trust, that I'm not the worthless gutter snipe my father said I was, the scheming seductress Cornelius says I am. I need to win this, not for the fortune, for myself. Understanding dawned in Alexander's eyes. To prove you're worth something. Yes, Rosalind. He lifted a hand, stopped himself from touching her face, fist clenching with the effort of restraint. You're already worth everything. Edmund knew it, I know it. When will you know it? When a court says so, she whispered. When 12 men look at the evidence and decide I'm telling the truth. When Cornelius's lies are exposed and Edmund's will stands. Then maybe I'll believe I deserved any of this. The candle flickered between them, throwing shadows across Alexander's face. 4 weeks, he said finally. 4 weeks. And then, we'll see. It wasn't a promise, wasn't even hope, really, but it was all she could give. Alexander nodded slowly, stepped back, putting proper distance between them again. I should go, before someone wakes and finds us. Yes, but he paused at the door, hand on the frame. Rosalind, whatever happens in that courtroom, whatever Cornelius says, whatever lies he tells, I'm on your side. Always. I know. Do you? She looked at him across the library. This man who'd hated her once, defended her fiercely, worked beside her for months, and somewhere along the way become the most important person in her world. Yes, she said softly. I know. He left, leaving the door open this time. Proper, professional, appropriate. Rosalind stood alone in the library until the candle burned down to nothing. The scandal broke 3 days before the trial. Someone, Cornelius almost certainly, leaked the case details to the London papers. The Ashworth affair, Duke's child bride. Accused of fraud. Questions. Raised about widow's relationship with new duke. Was the marriage a scheme? Court to decide. The articles were brutal. They painted Rosalind as a calculating seductress who'd manipulated a dying man. They suggested, heavily, that her relationship with Alexander was not merely professional. They dredged up every piece of scandal they could find. Her father's debts, the speed of the courtship, the age difference, the convenient timing of Edmund's death, the inheritance. Within 24 hours, it was the only thing London society talked about. Dinner invitations that hadn't already been withdrawn now were. Former acquaintances crossed the street to avoid Rosalind. Even some of the tenants, people she'd helped, people whose children attended schools she'd funded, started looking at her with suspicion. "Your Grace." Mrs. Pemberton appeared in the study doorway, face worried. "Perhaps you shouldn't go to the village today. The atmosphere is tense." "I'm not hiding." Rosalind closed the ledger she'd been pretending to read. "If I hide, it looks like guilt. I've done nothing wrong. I know that. But crowds can be unpredictable." When a crash from outside cut her off, both women rushed to the window. In the courtyard below, a group of perhaps 20 people had gathered. Villagers, mostly, carrying signs, "Gold digger," "Shame on the false duchess," "Justice for the duke." Rosalind felt the world tilt slightly. "Get Alexander," she said quietly. "Now." Mrs. Pemberton ran. Rosalind stayed at the window, watching her neighbours, people she'd tried to help, tried to serve, call for her destruction. This was what Cornelius wanted. Not just to win legally, to destroy her completely. Socially, personally, irreparably, and it was working. Alexander dispersed the crowd. His title and presence carried enough weight to send them away, at least temporarily, but the damage was done. "We should postpone the trial," Whitmore said at the emergency meeting that afternoon. "Request more time to prepare. Let the scandal die down." "No," Rosalind's voice was firm. "Postponing makes me look guilty. We proceed as scheduled. Your Grace, with respect to public opinion, has turned significantly against you. If we go to trial now, then we go to trial now, and we win." She looked around at all of them. Whitmore, the other solicitors, Alexander. "We have the truth. We have documentation. We have witnesses to Edmund's mental capacity. That has to be enough." "Public opinion matters," Hartley said carefully. "Juries are influenced by—" "There's no jury in a probate case," Alexander interjected. "It's decided by a judge alone, Lord Chancellor Hatherley, specifically." "Who is known for being swayed by public sentiment," Hartley countered. "Your Grace, I'm not saying we'll lose, but the odds have shifted considerably in the past 72 hours. Rosalind stood, paced to the window. The courtyard was empty now, but she could still see the angry faces in her mind. "What are our actual chances?" she asked without turning around. "Honestly." Silence. Then Whitmore, 60-40. "In our favor, but barely. And if we postpone, perhaps better, perhaps worse. Public memory is short, but Cornelius will simply use the delay to spread more poison. So we're damned either way." "Not damned," Alexander said firmly, "but challenged. Rosalind, look at me." She turned. He stood tall, every inch the Duke, but his eyes held something softer, something meant only for her. "We can win this. We have truth on our side. We have Edmund's own words in his will. We have testimony from doctors, clergy, witnesses to the marriage. Cornelius has innuendo and bribed servants. Truth will prevail." "You sound very certain." "I am certain, because I know you, and anyone who truly looks at the evidence will know you too. Know that you're incapable of the manipulation Cornelius describes. You didn't always think so," she said softly. "When you first arrived, you thought I was exactly what he says I am. I was wrong. And I saw the truth within weeks. Lord Hatherley will see it too." Rosalind wanted to believe him, wanted to have his faith, his certainty, but 8 months of fighting for every scrap of respect, every moment of legitimacy, had taught her the world was rarely fair to women like her. Still, she'd come too far to give up now. 3 days, she said finally. "We have 3 days to prepare. Let's use them well." The night before the trial, Alexander found Rosalind in the garden. She stood among Vivian's roses, dormant now in early spring, just beginning to show signs of new growth. The same roses where Edmund had sat in his final days, remembering his lost love. "You'll catch cold," Alexander said softly, approaching with a shawl. "It's freezing out here. I needed air. The house feels suffocating." He draped the shawl over her shoulders without touching her. Proper distance. Always proper distance. Nervous about tomorrow. Terrified. At least she was honest. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Alexander," Rosalind said finally, "if we lose tomorrow, if Cornelius wins and the inheritance is overturned, we won't lose. But if we do, what happens to me?" He turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean legally. If the marriage is declared invalid, if the will is overturned, do I lose everything? The title, the money, the properties?" "Yes," he admitted. "Legally, you'd have no claim to any of it." She nodded slowly. She'd suspected as much. And where would I go? The question clearly hadn't occurred to him. Rosalind, you wouldn't be cast out. I'd make sure you were provided for a pension, a residence somewhere comfortable. Charity, she said flatly. I'd be living on your charity. It wouldn't be charity. I've earned nothing if a court says I haven't. She pulled the shawl tighter. That's what tomorrow decides, isn't it? Not just Edmund's will, but whether I'm worth anything at all. Whether a girl from a ruined family in Manchester deserves to be a duchess. Whether I earned Edmund's faith or stole it. "Rosalind, I'm not looking for comfort," she cut him off gently. "I'm just stating facts. Tomorrow, 12 years of being told I'm worthless by my father either get confirmed or denied, and I'm terrified the court will agree with him." Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Edmund saw worth in you when you couldn't see it in yourself. I see it now. When will you see it? Maybe never." She smiled sadly. "So maybe I'll always be that scared 20-year-old who didn't know her own worth. Maybe that's who I really am under all the pretty dresses and titles." "No." Alexander's voice was fierce. "That girl survived. She learned. She grew. She became someone who runs 3 estates brilliantly, who cares for hundreds of tenants, who builds schools for children who need them. That's who you are, Rosalind. Not your father's victim. Not Cornelius's target. You—" Tears pricked her eyes. "I wish I had your certainty. Borrow mine then, until you find your own." She looked at him, really looked. At this man who'd started as her enemy and become, what? Friend didn't cover it. Partner was too cold. And love was too dangerous to name. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thee for believing in me when I can't. Always." They stood there in the garden as night fell completely. 2 people who couldn't touch, couldn't acknowledge what they felt, but were bound together anyway by something stronger than law or propriety. Tomorrow would decide everything. Tonight, they just had this, standing together in the dark, gathering strength for the battle ahead. The courtroom was packed. It seemed like half of London had come to witness the spectacle. The Ashworth scandal had captured public imagination. Wealth, nobility, a young widow, an attractive heir, accusations of fraud and seduction, better than any play in the West End. Rosalind sat at the defendant's table with Whitmore and the legal team. She wore severe black full mourning, though Edmund had been dead 8 months, hair pulled back tightly. No jewelry except her wedding ring. She looked every inch the grieving widow. Across the aisle, Cornelius sat with his own army of solicitors. He'd dressed well too, respectable, wounded, the concerned family member trying to protect his late cousin's legacy. The performance had already begun. Lord Chancellor Hatherley entered, and the room rose. He was a man in his 60s, stern-faced, with a reputation for fairness but also for being influenced by public sentiment. Their entire future rested in his hands. "Be seated," Hatherley said, settling into his chair. "We're here to examine a challenge to the will and testament of Edmund Laurent Ashworth, Duke of Ashworth. Mr. Blackwood, as the challenger, you may present your case." Cornelius's lead solicitor, a sharp-faced man named Graves, stood. "My lord, we seek to overturn the will of the late Duke on multiple grounds. First, that his grace was mentally incapacitated at the time of his marriage to Mrs. Rosalind Fairfax, rendering the marriage invalid. Second, that said marriage was procured through undue influence and manipulation. Third, that the marriage was never consummated, rendering it voidable under ecclesiastical law. And fourth, that there is evidence of improper relationship between the widow and the current Duke, suggesting conspiracy to defraud the estate." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Hatherley banged his gavel. "Order, Mr. Graves. Present your evidence." "Thank you, my lord. I call as my first witness Dr. Marcus Pemberton." A man in his 50s took the stand, was sworn in. "Dr. Pemberton, you examined the late Duke in the months before his death, correct?" "I did, sir." "And what was your assessment of his Grace's mental state?" "Declining, sir." The Duke was clearly suffering from advanced age-related cognitive impairment. Memory lapses, confusion, difficulty with complex reasoning. Rosalind felt ice flood her veins. It was a lie, complete fabrication. Edmund had been sharp until the stroke. She looked at Whitmore, who scribbled notes furiously. "And in your professional opinion," Graves continued, "was the Duke capable of making sound decisions regarding marriage and inheritance?" "In my professional opinion, no. He was vulnerable to manipulation by anyone who showed him kindness and attention." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Rosalind gripped the edge of the table. "Lies, all lies. Your witness," Graves said smugly, sitting down. Whitmore stood. "Dr. Pemberton, how many times did you personally examine the late Duke?" Several times, Count, sir." "How many?" "Exactly." "I don't recall the exact." "Let me help you recall. According to the Duke's medical records, you examined him precisely once, 7 months before his death, for a routine physical. Does that sound accurate?" Pemberton shifted uncomfortably. "That sounds possible. And yet you testified under oath that you assessed his cognitive state in the months before death, plural. How could you assess cognitive decline over multiple months when you saw him only once, 7 months before he died?" I based my assessment on reports from whom?" "I don't recall specifically." "You don't recall?" Whitmore's voice dripped skepticism. "Dr. Pemberton, how much is Mr. Blackwood paying you to testify today?" "Objection!" Graves leapt up. "Baseless accusation." "Withdrawn," Whitmore said smoothly. "No further questions." Pemberton left the stand, clearly rattled, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt about Edmund's capacity had been planted. Graves called 3 more witnesses: a maid who claimed Rosalind had been cold and calculating toward Edmund, a footman who swore he'd seen Rosalind and Alexander in compromising positions, a financial advisor who suggested the marriage had been suspiciously quick. Each testimony chipped away at Rosalind's legitimacy. By midday, when they broke for lunch, Rosalind felt like she was drowning. "Tos, it's not going well," she said quietly to Whitmore in the anteroom. "It's going exactly as expected," he countered. "Cornelius throws mud, we clean it up. This afternoon, we present our case. We have Dr. Harrison, who actually treated the Duke regularly. We have the Archbishop who performed the ceremony. We have testimony from servants who witnessed the genuine affection between you and the Duke." "And the non-consummation?" Whitmore hesitated. "Yeah, that's still our vulnerability, but we'll argue it's irrelevant. Many elderly noblemen marry without physical relations. It doesn't invalidate the union. Will Hatherley accept that? We'll find out." The afternoon session began with Whitmore presenting their defense. "My lord," he stood, commanding the room's attention, "the challenge before this court is built entirely on innuendo, bribed testimony, and malicious speculation. We will demonstrate, through credible witnesses and documented evidence, that the late Duke of Ashworth was of sound mind, that his marriage was legitimate and entered into freely, and that his will reflects his genuine intentions." "Proceed," Hatherley said. "I call Dr. William Harrison." The courtroom stirred as Dr. Harrison took the stand. He was a respected physician, known throughout London, with no apparent connection to either party beyond his professional relationship with the late Duke. "Dr. Harrison, how long did you serve as the Duke of Ashworth's personal physician?" 12 years, sir." "And you examined him regularly during that time?" "Yes, monthly appointments, and more frequently as his heart condition worsened." "Can you describe the Duke's mental state in the months before his death?" "Completely sound," Harrison said firmly. "His Grace suffered physically. The heart failure was progressive and terminal. But his mind remained sharp. He discussed complex medical decisions, managed his affairs, wrote correspondence. There was no cognitive impairment whatsoever. And you examined him how close to the wedding?" 1 week before, I had to certify his fitness to marry. Standard procedure. I found him mentally competent in every respect." "Dr. Harrison, the court has heard testimony suggesting the Duke was confused, easily manipulated. Do you agree with that assessment?" "Absolutely not. The Duke knew exactly what he was doing. He discussed the marriage with me explicitly, explained his reasoning, asked about the physical limitations his condition imposed. He was making an informed, rational decision." Whitmore nodded. "And after the marriage, you continued to attend the Duke?" "Yes, until his stroke in October. I saw him weekly. He and the Duchess often met with me together to discuss his care. She was attentive, compassionate, genuinely concerned for his welfare. Did you ever observe anything that suggested manipulation or undue influence? Never. What I observed was a young woman caring for an elderly patient with remarkable patience and tenderness. She reminded him to take medications, adjusted his pillows, read to him when he was tired. It was touching, actually, like a devoted daughter. The words hit Rosalind like a physical blow. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. "Thank you, Dr. Harrison," Whitmore said. "Your witness." Graves approached the stand like a shark scenting blood. "Dr. Harrison, you said the Duchess was like a devoted daughter to the Duke. But she wasn't his daughter, was she?" "No, she was his wife. His wife. A woman 55 years his junior. A woman who stood to inherit a fortune upon his death. And you saw nothing suspicious in this arrangement." "I saw a marriage of convenience that became a genuine friendship," Harrison said calmly. "Not uncommon among the aristocracy. A friendship. How convenient." Graves paced. "Tell me, Doctor, did the Duke ever discuss with you his physical relationship with his wife?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "Such matters are private. Answer the question. Did the Duke discuss whether he was intimate with his wife?" Silence fell over the courtroom, everyone leaning forward. "The Duke informed me," Harrison said carefully, "that due to his age and condition, he did not intend to pursue marital relations. He asked my medical opinion on whether this was advisable, and I concurred that given his heart condition, any physical exertion could be dangerous. So the marriage was never consummated." "That is not what I said. But it's true, isn't it? The Duke, by his own admission to you, never had intimate relations with his wife. Physical intimacy is not the sole measure of a valid marriage. Answer yes or no, Doctor. Was the marriage consummated?" Harrison looked miserable. "To my knowledge, no." The courtroom erupted. Hatherley's gavel banged repeatedly. "Order! Order!" But the damage was catastrophic. Rosalind felt the room spin slightly. She gripped the table edge, knuckles white. Across the aisle, Cornelius smiled. Whitmore called 3 more witnesses. The Archbishop who'd performed the ceremony, testifying to its legitimacy, Mrs. Pemberton, describing Rosalind's genuine care for Edmund, and finally, Alexander himself. Alexander took the stand with quiet dignity, was sworn in. "Your Grace," Whitmore began, "you initially opposed your uncle's marriage to Miss Fairfax, did you not?" "I did," Alexander admitted. "I thought it was inappropriate. I was wrong." "What changed your mind?" "Observing them together, seeing how she cared for him, watching my uncle become lighter, happier. He'd been grieving my aunt for 7 years. Miss Fairfax, Mrs. Ashworth, gave him something to live for in his final months. And after his death, you've worked closely with the Duchess as co-administrator. What has that experience been like?" "She's brilliant," Alexander said simply. "She understands estate management better than most men I know. She's fair with tenants, shrewd with investments, compassionate in her decisions. My uncle chose well. The court has heard suggestions that your relationship with the Duchess is more than professional. How do you respond?" Alexander's eyes found Rosalind's across the courtroom, held them. "My relationship with the Duchess is one of profound respect and partnership. We work together to manage estates that support 300 families. That requires trust, communication, and mutual regard. If people choose to interpret that as something inappropriate, that says more about their minds than ours. It wasn't a denial, not exactly, but it was honest." Graves practically leapt to cross-examine. "Your Grace, you live under the same roof as the Duchess, correct?" "Ashworth Manor is the ducal seat. We both reside there, yes." "In separate wings, I'm sure you'll tell us." "In separate apartments, yes." "Separated by how much distance? A hallway? A door?" "Mr. Graves, if you're suggesting—" "I'm suggesting, Your Grace, that a young widow and an unmarried duke living together for 8 months creates, at minimum, the appearance of impropriety." "The appearance of impropriety is not actual impropriety, isn't it?" Graves smiled coldly. "Tell me, Your Grace, are you in love with your uncle's widow?" The courtroom went dead silent. Rosalind stopped breathing. Alexander's hands gripped the witness box. His jaw worked. The truth would destroy them, but a lie. "I have deep respect and admiration for the Duchess," he said finally, each word carefully chosen. "I care about her welfare and her future. Beyond that, my personal feelings are not relevant to this proceeding." "Not relevant?" Graves laughed. "For Your Grace, If you've been conducting an affair with your uncle's widow, I have not. But you want to, don't you? You've wanted to since before your uncle died. Objection. Whitmore was on his feet. The witness's current feelings have no bearing on the validity of a marriage that occurred 9 months ago. It has every bearing if those feelings influenced the marriage in the first place. Graves shot back. Enough! Hatherley's gavel cracked. Mr. Graves, unless you have evidence, actual evidence of impropriety before the Duke's death, move on. Graves smiled. As you wish, my lord. No further questions. Alexander left the stand, face carefully controlled. But Rosalind had seen the truth in his eyes during that one question. Are you in love with your uncle's widow? He hadn't said no. The trial recessed for the day as the sun set. Rosalind left through a side door to avoid the crowds, but reporters still swarmed. Your Grace, did you manipulate the Duke? Is it true the marriage was never consummated? Are you sleeping with the new Duke? Alexander's hand closed on her elbow, firm, protective, as he guided her through the mob to the waiting carriage. They didn't speak during the ride home. What was there to say? Inside the carriage, in the dimness, Rosalind finally let the tears fall. Silent, devastating. Alexander watched her, hands clenched in his lap, clearly wanting to comfort her but maintaining that damned proper distance. We're losing, she whispered finally. We don't know that. Alexander, they made Edmund sound like a senile old fool, and me like a scheming whore. Even our own witnesses confirmed the marriage wasn't consummated. What more does Cornelius need? The truth. The truth doesn't matter. The words burst out. Don't you see? It doesn't matter that Edmund was brilliant and kind. It doesn't matter that I genuinely cared for him. It doesn't matter that we're not having an affair. All that matters is what they think. And they think I'm exactly what my father always said I was, worthless. Rosalind, don't... She held up a hand. Please don't tell me I'm not worthless. Not now. I can't bear kindness right now. So Alexander sat in silence, watching her break, unable to do anything but witness her pain. When they arrived at Ashworth Manor, Rosalind went straight to her apartments, locked the door, refused dinner. She sat by the window, staring out at the dark gardens, and wondered if maybe Cornelius was right. Maybe she was a fraud. Maybe Edmund had been fooled. Maybe she deserved to lose everything. It was past midnight when she heard the soft knock. Rosalind, Alexander's voice muffled through the door. Please let me in. Go away. No. Alexander, I'm not leaving until you open this door. Silence. Then quietly. I'll sleep in the hallway if I have to, but I'm not leaving you alone tonight. Rosalind walked to the door, rested her forehead against the wood. Why? She whispered. Because you're hurting, and I can't. So I can't just leave you to hurt alone. Her hand moved to the lock, hesitated. Propriety, witnesses, scandal. To hell with it. She unlocked the door, opened it. Alexander stood in the hallway, still in his court clothes, hair disheveled from running his hands through it, eyes exhausted and worried. May I come in? She stepped aside. He entered. She closed the door, not locked, just closed. They stood in her sitting room. The beautiful space Edmund had given her, decorated in greens and creams, filled with books and comfortable furniture, and all the trappings of wealth she might lose in 2 days. I'm going to lose, she said flatly. Tomorrow Cornelius will rest his case, Whitmore will make closing arguments, and Hatherley will decide I'm a fraud. You don't know that. Yes, I do. You saw their faces. Alexander, the spectators, the reporters. They've already convicted me. Hatherley will just make it official. Then we appeal. To what court? With what money? Cornelius will take everything. And even if we could appeal, how many more trials can I endure? How many more times can I sit there while people call me a whore? Alexander crossed to her slowly, giving her time to step back if she wanted. She didn't. Listen to me, he said quietly. If we lose tomorrow, if Hatherley overturns the will, you won't be destitute. I'll make sure of that. But charity? Not charity. What you've earned. Rosalind, you've worked for 8 months as co-administrator. You've made decisions that increased estate revenue by 15%. You've implemented systems that will benefit tenants for generations. That's worth compensation. The court won't see it that way. I don't care what the court sees. I see it. He lifted his hands, stopped just short of touching her face. I see you. The real you. Not the frightened girl your father sold. Not the schemer Cornelius invents. You. Brilliant. Compassionate. Strong. Worth everything. Then why can't I feel it? The words broke. Why do I still feel like that worthless girl in Manchester waiting to be sold? Because trauma doesn't heal just because circumstances change, Alexander said gently. Because your father spent 20 years telling you that you were nothing, and 8 months of being a duchess can't erase that. But Rosalind, his voice intensified, just because you can't feel your worth doesn't mean it isn't real. She looked up at him. This man who'd hated her, defended her, worked beside her, fallen for her without either of them meaning to. I'm so tired, she whispered. Tired of fighting, tired of proving myself, tired of being strong. Then don't be. Not tonight. His hands finally moved, cupped her face with infinite gentleness. Tonight, just be tired. Be scared. Be whatever you need to be. I've got you. And she broke, completely, sobbed into his chest as he held her, one hand cradling her head, the other around her waist, whispering wordless comfort. All the fear, all the shame, all the exhaustion, 8 months of holding herself together, of being the Duchess, of pretending she was strong enough for this, came pouring out. Alexander held her through all of it, didn't tell her to stop crying, didn't try to fix it, just held her. When the sobs finally subsided to hiccups, when she could breathe again, she pulled back slightly. I got your shirt wet, she said stupidly. I don't care. They stood there, too close, her face still cradled in his hands, both of them acutely aware they'd crossed every line of propriety. I should go, Alexander said, but he didn't move. You should, Rosalind agreed, but she didn't step back. If anyone finds out I was here, I know. It would confirm everything Cornelius says. I know. But still neither of them moved. Rosalind, his thumb brushed across her cheekbone, wiping away a remaining tear. After the trial, win or lose, we need to talk, really talk, about this, about us. There might not be an us after the trial. There will always be an us, he said fiercely. Court decision doesn't change that. Title doesn't change that. Money doesn't change that. Then what are we? I don't know yet, but I know I'm not letting you go. He leaned forward, just slightly, his forehead resting against hers, not a kiss, but intimate in a way that went deeper than kissing. A promise, a connection, a moment of truth in the midst of lies. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, eyes closed, finding strength in each other. Then Alexander pulled back, hands dropping to his sides. I should go. Before I do something we'll both regret. Would we regret it? The question hung in the air. Maybe not, he admitted. But we'd regret the consequences, and I won't do that to you, won't give Cornelius any more ammunition. He was right. She knew he was right. Good night, Rosalind. Good night, Alexander. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Rosalind stood alone in her sitting room, touching her face where his hands had been, and tried not to think about what tomorrow would bring. The final day of the trial arrived with grey skies and cold wind, weather matching the mood. Whitmore made his closing arguments first, methodically dismantling every piece of Cornelius's case. The bribed doctor, the suspicious witnesses, the irrelevance of non-consummation to legal validity. My lord, he concluded, this challenge is motivated entirely by greed. Mr. Blackwood seeks to overturn a legitimate will because he's disappointed he wasn't named beneficiary. But disappointment is not grounds for legal action. The late Duke was of sound mind. His marriage was legal. His will is clear, it must stand. Then it was Graves's turn. My lord, we are asked to believe that a 20-year-old girl from a ruined family married a dying duke, 55 years her senior, purely out of, what, love? Respect. We are asked to believe that this marriage, never consummated, entered into with suspicious haste, was genuine. We are asked to ignore 8 months of the widow living intimately with the new duke, who conveniently inherits the title while she keeps the fortune. He paused for effect. My lord, this is fraud, perhaps sophisticated fraud, aided by expensive solicitors and circumstantial legality, but fraud nonetheless, and this court should not reward it. Hatherley listened to both arguments with an impassive face. When Graves finished, the Chancellor was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Whitmore. Do you have any final evidence to present before I render judgment? Whitmore stood. My lord, there is one final document. I hesitated to present it, as it is deeply personal. But given the accusations against the late Duke's mental capacity and the Duchess's character, I believe it is necessary. He pulled an envelope from his leather case, sealed with red wax bearing the Ashworth ducal seal. This is a letter written by the late Duke 2 months before his death. He left explicit instructions with me that it should be opened only under specific circumstances, if his will were challenged, and if the challenge reached trial. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Hatherley leaned forward. "You have had this letter throughout the proceedings and only now present it." "The Duke's instructions were clear, my lord. It was to be a final word. Should all other evidence prove insufficient, he asked that it not be used unless absolutely necessary, as it contains private matters. But I believe we have reached that point." "Very well. You may read it." Whitmore broke the seal, unfolded the letter carefully. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Even Cornelius looked uncertain. Whitmore cleared his throat and began to read. "Testamentary letter and final declaration of Edmund Laurent Ashworth, Duke of Ashworth, written 15th of August 1887, witnessed by Dr. William Harrison and Reverend Charles Matthews." Whitmore's voice was steady but respectful as he read, "To whom it may concern, this letter is to be opened and read publicly only if my will is challenged in court. If you are hearing these words, it means someone, likely my cousin Cornelius, has questioned the validity of my marriage to Rosalind Margaret Fairfax, or the legitimacy of my testamentary decisions. Let me be absolutely clear. I write this in full possession of my mental faculties, a fact that can be attested by the 2 gentlemen who witness this document below. Though my body fails me daily due to terminal heart disease, my mind remains sharp. I know exactly what I am doing. I know exactly what I have done, and I regret nothing. Regarding my marriage to Rosalind, the union was legal, proper, and entered into with complete understanding on both sides. Yes, there was a significant age difference. Yes, her family was in financial distress. Yes, I paid a considerable sum to her father. These facts do not constitute fraud. They constitute honesty about circumstances. I married Rosalind, knowing I had months to live. I married her knowing she needed financial security. I married her knowing that our relationship would never be romantic in the traditional sense, and she married me with full knowledge of all these factors. What those who challenge this marriage fail to understand, or choose to ignore, is that not all marriages are love matches. Many among the aristocracy are arrangements of mutual benefit. Mine was no different, except in one crucial aspect. It became something far more meaningful than either of us anticipated. Regarding the question of consummation, which I expect will be raised with much prurient interest, the marriage was not consummated. This was my choice, not Rosalind's. I was a man of 75 years with a failing heart. To demand physical intimacy of a woman young enough to be my great-granddaughter would have been unconscionable. Any man of honor in my position would have made the same decision. The lack of physical relations does not invalidate the marriage under law. I consulted extensively with legal experts on this matter before the wedding. Consummation is not a legal requirement when both parties consent to the marriage freely, which we did. If someone argues otherwise, let them explain publicly why they believe an elderly, dying man had an obligation to consummate a marriage with a young woman. I suspect they will find the argument far less compelling when stated plainly. Regarding my mental capacity, I anticipated accusations of senility or manipulation. Therefore, I have ensured that all relevant medical records, correspondence, and business decisions from the months before my marriage are available for examination. Any objective observer will find clear evidence of continued mental acuity. Furthermore, I specifically requested Dr. Harrison conduct a thorough evaluation of my mental fitness 1 week before my wedding. His written assessment, also available through Mr. Whitmore, confirms complete cognitive capacity. I was not manipulated. I was not confused. I made a deliberate choice to secure my fortune for someone who would use it well, rather than allow it to be squandered by relatives who have demonstrated nothing but wasteful self-interest for decades. Regarding Rosalind's character, I did not choose my wife randomly. Before approaching her family, I spent weeks observing her. I watched how she treated strangers with kindness when no reward was expected. I watched how she handled poverty with dignity despite degradation. I watched her care for younger siblings with limited resources but unlimited love. I saw in her what my beloved late wife Vivian would have seen, genuine goodness in a world that had tried to crush it. Vivian and I were married for 40 years. We built a life of meaning and purpose together. When she died, she made me promise not to let our wealth feed parasites and gamblers. She asked me to find someone with a good heart who would use our fortune to make the world less cruel. I found that person in Rosalind. This was not manipulation by her, it was fulfillment of a promise to my wife, to the court. My will stands as written. Rosalind receives my personal fortune because she has already proven herself worthy of it through her character and her work. Alexander receives the dukedom because it is his by right, and because I trust him to lead with honor. If you are considering overturning my clearly stated wishes based on speculation about propriety or scandalous whispers about impropriety, ask yourselves, whose interests are truly served, justice or greed? Final words to Rosalind and Alexander. If you are hearing this letter read aloud in court, then you have endured exactly the trial I feared and tried to prevent. I am sorry for that. Sorry that my death has brought you such scrutiny and pain, but I am not sorry for the choices I made. I am not sorry for marrying you, Rosalind. I am not sorry for bringing you into this family. I am not sorry for believing you could be something extraordinary, because you already are. And Alexander, my nephew who has always been like a son, I am not sorry for leaving you two as partners. Co-administration was not merely about protecting Rosalind's inheritance. It was about forcing you to know each other, to work together, to see in each other what I saw: strength, honor, complementary capabilities. If over these months since my death, something more than partnership has grown between you, I am not surprised. I expected it, hoped for it, even. Vivian and I had 40 years of love. It still was not enough. If you two have found even the possibility of that kind of connection, you would be fools to waste it out of fear of scandal or misplaced guilt over my memory. I give you both my blessing. Not that you need it, but perhaps it helps. Live in love. Build something worthy of the legacy Vivian and I entrusted to you. Do not let my death be the end of joy. Let it be the beginning of something new. And to those who challenge this will out of greed or spite, you have my contempt. May you live long enough to regret your choices. Written in sound mind and clear conscience, Edmund Laurent Ashworth, Duke of Ashworth. Witnessed and confirmed, Dr. William Harrison. Reverend Charles Matthews, 15th of August 1887. Silence. Complete. Absolute silence. Whitmore lowered the letter. His own eyes were damp. Rosalind sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she'd just heard. Edmund had known everything, anticipated everything, and even from beyond death, he was still protecting them. Alexander's hand found hers under the table, squeezed tight. He was crying too, silent tears of grief and gratitude and overwhelming emotion. Across the aisle, Cornelius looked like he'd been struck. His face was pale, mouth working, but no sound emerging. Lord Hatherley removed his spectacles, wiped them slowly. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. That was extraordinary. Mr. Whitmore, the witnesses who signed this document, they are available to verify authenticity? Both are present in the courtroom, my lord. Dr. Harrison has already testified. Reverend Matthews is here as well. That won't be necessary. The letter's authenticity is self-evident. Hatherley looked at Cornelius. Mr. Blackwood, do you wish to respond to this testimony? Cornelius opened his mouth, closed it. He had nothing. No response could overcome Edmund's words from beyond the grave. The letter changes nothing, he finally managed. The marriage was exactly what the Duke described. Hatherley cut him off, voice hard. A legal arrangement entered into by two consenting adults, one of whom has now spoken from beyond death to defend both his decision and his wife's character. This court has heard enough. He looked at Rosalind. Mrs. Ashworth, I apologize that you have had to endure this trial. The late Duke's letter makes abundantly clear what should have been obvious from the start. You were chosen for your character, not your manipulation. The marriage was legitimate. The will stands. He turned to Cornelius. Mr. Blackwood, your challenge is denied in its entirety. Furthermore, this court finds your motivations to be exactly what the late Duke suggested: greed and spite. You will pay all court costs for both parties, and you are hereby barred from bringing any further challenges to the Duke's will or estate. The gavel fell. This case is closed. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouting questions, spectators murmuring. Cornelius on his feet, face red with rage, his solicitors pulling him back. But Rosalind heard none of it. She was sobbing into her hands, shoulders shaking, 8 months of fear and grief and doubt finally releasing. Edmund had saved her. One last time. From beyond death, she felt Alexander's arm around her shoulders, propriety be damned, pulling her close. "It's over," he whispered. "Rosalind, it's over. You won." He knew, she sobbed. He knew everything. He knew that we might. "I know." Alexander's voice was thick with tears. "I know." Whitmore gave them a moment, then cleared his throat gently. "Your Graces, we should leave before the reporters swarm. There's a side exit." Alexander helped Rosalind stand. She was shaking so badly she could barely walk. They made it to the carriage, Whitmore running interference with the press. As soon as the door closed, as soon as they were alone, Rosalind turned to Alexander. "He gave us his blessing," she whispered. "Did you hear that part? He said if we found each other, we'd be fools to waste it." "I heard." "Alexander, we don't have to hide anymore. We don't have to pretend he wanted this." "I know. So why do you look scared?" Alexander took her hands. "Because I want to do this right, not in the aftermath of a trial. Not while you're emotional and vulnerable. I want to court you properly. Give you time to be sure this is what you want, not just what Edmund blessed. I am sure. You're in shock. You just won a court case and heard a letter from a man you loved. I'm not going to propose to you right now and have you always wonder if you said yes out of gratitude or grief." Rosalind stared at him. "You're infuriating." "I'm patient." He lifted her hands to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. "I've waited 8 months. I can wait a bit longer to do this properly." "How long?" "Until you're ready. Until you're certain. Until you can say yes, knowing it's what you want, not what anyone else wants for you. Not your father, not Edmund, not society. Just you. Damn him for being noble. Damn him for being right." "Fine," she said, wiping her tears. "So court me properly then. Woo me. Whatever it is people do." "Whatever it is people do," Alexander repeated, smiling. "I'll figure it out." "You better." The carriage rolled toward Ashworth Manor, carrying 2 people who'd been through hell and emerged on the other side. Together, the weeks following the trial were strange. Rosalind had won. The will stood. She was secure, legally, financially, irrevocably, and yet everything felt uncertain. Alexander had meant what he said about courting her properly. He took it seriously, irritatingly seriously. Flowers arrived at breakfast, not extravagant bouquets, small, thoughtful arrangements. Violets because she'd once mentioned they were her favorite. Wild roses from the garden Vivienne planted. He asked her to dinner, formally, with written invitations delivered by footmen. They rode out to inspect the estates, but now with explicit romantic intent, not just business. He pointed out views he thought she'd enjoy, shared stories about his childhood, asked about hers. Slowly, carefully, he was courting her, and it was driving her mad, because she already knew, had known for months, didn't need convincing or wooing or careful consideration. She loved him, wanted him, was ready, but Alexander was determined to do this properly. It was 6 weeks after the trial when things finally came to a head. Rosalind was in the garden, Vivian's garden, where the roses were finally blooming in full glory. Late May had brought warmth and colour back to Ashworth Manor. She was cutting flowers for the entrance hall when she heard footsteps behind her. "You're going to ruin your dress kneeling in the dirt like that," Alexander said, amusement in his voice. "I've ruined dresses before. They wash." She didn't look up, carefully snipping a particularly beautiful pale pink rose. "Rosalind?" Something in his tone made her turn. Alexander stood a few feet away, dressed formally despite the afternoon hour. He looked nervous, actually nervous, something she'd rarely seen. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just—" He ran a hand through his hair, that gesture of frustration she'd come to know so well. "I had a whole plan, a romantic setting, the right words prepared. But standing here watching you in the roses that Vivian planted, in the garden where my uncle spent his last peaceful moments, I realize this is exactly right." Rosalind's heart started hammering. "Alexander, let me say this before I lose my nerve." He stepped closer. "I've been courting you for 6 weeks, taking you to dinner, sending flowers, trying to prove I'm serious about this, about us. But the truth is, I was serious 8 months ago. I just couldn't admit it then." "I know. Do you?" He smiled slightly. "Because I'm not sure you do. I don't think you fully understand what you mean to me." "Then tell me." He took another step closer. Close enough she could see the grey blue of his eyes, Edmund's eyes, watching her with such intensity it stole her breath. "You walked into this family as a transaction, a business arrangement, a dying man's final gamble, and you transformed everything. You took estates I thought I knew and found ways to make them better. You took tenants I'd known my whole life and earned their respect in months. You took a grief-stricken manor full of ghosts and brought it back to life. Alexander, I'm not finished. His voice was gentle but firm. You took a man who thought he had his whole life planned out, inherit the dukedom, marry someone appropriate, fulfill his duties, and you ruined all of it. Because now I can't imagine marrying anyone else. Can't imagine running these estates without you. Can't imagine a single day without seeing you, hearing your laugh, watching you make brilliant decisions and then doubt yourself because you still can't see what everyone else sees. Tears pricked Rosalind's eyes. And what do they see? Someone extraordinary. Someone worth everything Edmund believed in. Someone I've fallen completely, irrevocably, inconveniently in love with. There it was, finally. The words he'd been holding back for months. Inconveniently. She managed a watery laugh. Very inconveniently. You're my uncle's widow. Society still whispers about us. You're 4 years younger than me, not scandalous by most standards, but given the circumstances. And you're stubborn and independent and you don't need me, so which makes loving you both easier and harder. Easier how? Because I know you're with me by choice, not necessity. Harder because, he smiled ruefully, because you don't need me, which means you could leave at any moment and survive just fine. I'm not going anywhere. Then prove it. Alexander reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. Rosalind's breath caught. This isn't Edmund's ring, he said, opening the box. Inside was a simple band of gold set with a single sapphire, deep blue, the color of twilight. I had this made specifically for you. I wanted you to have something that was ours, not inherited from the past, something that represents us, not what came before. He knelt in the dirt, expensive trousers be damned, and looked up at her. Rosalind Margaret Ashworth, Duchess of Ashworth in your own right, woman who saved herself and then saved me without even knowing it. Will you marry me? Not for money or position or duty, but because you love me as much as I love you, because we're better together than apart, because Edmund was right and we'd be fools to waste this. Rosalind looked down at him. This man who'd hated her, defended her, worked beside her, fallen in love with her so slowly neither of them noticed until it was too late to stop. Yes, she whispered. Yes. Of course, yes. Alexander's face broke into the most genuine smile she'd ever seen. He slipped the ring onto her finger. Perfect fit, because of course he'd somehow measured without her knowing, and stood, pulling her into his arms. Can I kiss you now? Properly? Not just a promise, but an actual kiss. If you don't, I'll never forgive you. He laughed, pure joy, and kissed her. It was nothing like what Rosalind had imagined, not desperate or wild or dramatically passionate. It was gentle, reverent, a promise being sealed, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious, her fingers gripping his coat like an anchor. It tasted like tears and laughter and coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. I should have said it months ago. I love you too. And you're right. You should have. He laughed again, the sound filling the garden. When should we marry? Soon, Rosalind said firmly. I'm done waiting. Done being proper. We've been proper for 8 months and it nearly killed both of us. Society will talk. Society always talks. Let them. She pulled back to look at him. Edmund said we'd be fools to waste this. I'm done being foolish. 3 weeks then. Small ceremony. Just family and close friends. In the manor chapel. Perfect. And then, I'm taking you somewhere far from here. France? Maybe? Or Italy. Somewhere no one knows the scandal. And we can just be Alexander and Rosalind. That sounds wonderful. They stood there in the garden, holding each other, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. The roses Vivienne planted surrounded them. The manor Edmund loved stood strong behind them, and ahead was a future they'd built together, through fire and scandal and finally joy. The wedding was small, as promised. 3 weeks later, on a perfect June day, Rosalind walked down the aisle of the Ashworth Chapel for the second time. But this time, no fear, no dread, no wondering what horrors awaited. Just Alexander at the altar, watching her with so much love it made her chest ache. Her mother was there, crying happy tears. Tom and Lily, both grown so much in the past year, beaming from the front pew. Mrs. Pemberton dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Whitmore looking satisfied, as if he'd orchestrated the whole thing himself. And in spirit, if not in body, Edmund and Vivienne, whose love story had somehow made this one possible. The ceremony was simple, the vows traditional, but when Alexander slipped a second ring onto her finger, a wedding band to match the engagement ring, Rosalind felt something lock into place. This was right. This was real. This was hers. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Archbishop said, smiling. "You may kiss your bride." And Alexander did, thoroughly, to scattered laughter and applause. When they walked back down the aisle together, Rosalind caught sight of Cornelius lurking at the very back of the chapel. He'd been barred from the estate, but apparently couldn't resist watching his final defeat. She met his eyes, smiled. She'd won. Not just the money or the title, but something far more valuable, the right to choose her own life, her own love, her own future. Cornelius turned and left, shoulders slumped in defeat. Rosalind never saw him again. 2 years later, the nursery at Ashworth Manor was painted in soft greens and creams, colours that echoed the study Edmund had given Rosalind, the apartments where she'd first learned to be a duchess. Rosalind sat in the rocking chair by the window, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in white linen. 6 weeks old, perfect in every way. "Is he sleeping?" Alexander asked softly, entering with a tea tray. "Finally, he's got your stubborn streak. Fights sleep like it's personally offensive." Alexander smiled, setting down the tray and coming to peer at their son. "He's perfect. He is." They'd named him Edmund Vivian Ashworth. The names felt right, honouring the two people whose love story had created space for theirs. Little Edmund had his father's dark hair and his mother's determined chin, whose eyes he'd have remained to be seen, but Rosalind secretly hoped for grey-blue, a connection to the grandfather he'd never meet, but whose legacy he'd inherit. "Tom wrote," Alexander said, sitting in the chair beside hers. "He's been accepted to the Royal Engineering Academy. Full scholarship. Edmund would be so proud." "Edmund would be proud of you. Look what you've built, Rosalind." Tom at the academy. Lily at the best girls' school in England. 5 new schools across the estate. The tenant cottages all renovated. The dairy expansion. "We built," she corrected. "We built all of it. Together." "Together," he agreed, taking her free hand. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son sleep, sunlight streaming through the window. Outside, the gardens bloomed. Vivian's roses were having their best year ever. Mrs. Pemberton swore it was because they sensed the new life in the house. The estate thrived, the tenants prospered, and Ashworth Manor, which had been a mausoleum of grief 2 years ago, rang with laughter and life. "Do you think he knew?" Rosalind asked softly. "Edmund, do you think he knew it would turn out like this?" "I think he hoped," Alexander said, "and hope was enough. He told me once that I was worth everything. I didn't believe him then, and now." Rosalind looked at her son, at her husband, at the life they'd built from impossible circumstances. "Now I'm starting to—" Alexander leaned over and kissed her forehead. "Good. Only took you 2 years. Some lessons take time." "Well, we have time now, all the time in the world." Little Edmund stirred in his sleep, made a small sound, settled again, and Rosalind thought about the scared girl who'd been sold by her father, who'd married a dying duke out of desperation, who'd been called a gold digger and a fraud and a whore. That girl was gone. Not erased, never erased, but transformed, grown, strengthened by fire into someone new, someone who'd taken a transaction and turned it into a family, someone who'd taken grief and turned it into joy, someone who'd been told she was worthless and proved every single day that she was anything but. "Thank you," she whispered to the portrait of Edmund that hung in the nursery, "for seeing what I couldn't see, for saving me, for bringing me here." The portrait didn't answer, of course, but in the late afternoon sunlight, she could have sworn Edmund smiled. The end. This is the story of Rosalind Ashworth, who was sold as property and became a duchess twice over, once by circumstance, once by choice. The story of Edmund Ashworth, whose final act of love created ripples that changed lives he'd never witness, and the story of Alexander, who learned that the best things in life are the ones you never planned for. Sometimes the coldest transactions hide the warmest hearts. Sometimes impossible situations create extraordinary futures. And sometimes, just sometimes, love finds a way, even when every odd is against it. Life opens doors that look like prisons. But when we walk through with courage, we find gardens waiting on the other side. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to our channel, leaving a like, sharing it with friends, and writing a comment below telling us what you thought. Your support means everything to us and keeps us inspired to tell more stories filled with love, resilience, redemption, and second chances. At the end of this video, you'll find another unforgettable romance from our collection. Click and discover where the next story will take you. With all our appreciation, the Empire of Hearts Stories team.